As always, it's good to be with you. And I think you'll find tonight's discussion very interesting. It's a very important topic for, well, everyone, probably. But I wanted to do it tonight because, as a follow up to our show yesterday, I think it's just the right time. I've wanted to kind of do a discussion like this for a while, but after yesterday and I was thinking about it, I realized, the thing is, it's very hard. Watchtower people, now you know. Now you know what you are doing to other people. And maybe rightly so in some respects, right? You go door to door and you talk to people, whether they're Catholic, Protestant, Mormon, whatever, and you expect them to believe what you're teaching, reject what they believe, and join you, no matter the cost, right? That's what you basically want. All these everybody who doesn't agree with you and isn't part of your organization, pretty much you want them to just give it all up, right? Whatever it is they're believing and teaching, and whoever they're doing it with, and then come on over to you, the organization, Watchtower. And if they don't, as you know, Watchtower people, you believe everybody outside of your organization who's alive in Armageddon is going to be destroyed. Except, maybe there's a few that somehow you allow to be admitted in some way with the law in their heart, depending on how you view that now. But basically, you're pretty much judging everybody outside your organization, right? Okay, so is there any hope? Is there any hope for these different Christian groups, Watchtower people? Any at all? Any hope for any Trinitarians? Any hope for Mormons? What about if you're wrong? Like I believe I proved very clearly yesterday with regard to the birth of the kingdom. What if you're wrong? What if what I presented yesterday is correct? Right? And I just read the text, right? Some of them we got into interpretation, but some of them were pretty explicit and just mean what they say, right? There's no real way around it. What if you're wrong? Is there any hope for you? So, is there any hope for all the groups outside of the Watchtower organization? I think you'd probably say no, with maybe some minor exceptions. So, what should we think of you? I mean, it's not so much what we should think of you, like what we want to, right? It's what does the Bible teach, right? What should be our position based on the Bible where the Watchtower is concerned? I was pretty severe on some Watchtower teaching yesterday, and for good reason. Not addressing some of these issues that way and not condemning certain people like Craig Little to their face, just like Paul did to Peter and James and Barnabas. I'm not sure if James was there at that time, but in Galatians 1 and 2, some of the people that were there came from James. Either way, Barnabas was led astray. Paul wouldn't stand for it. No way. Right up in front of everyone and condemned him. Yesterday, we had an individual named Craig Little who lied about the revelation of Jesus Christ, who was so bothered by his false doctrine collapsing all around him that he just decided this was a great place for him to post a comment to lie about what we believe is an inspired message from God and Jesus, and that if you add to or take away from, you're cursed. You're a cursed individual, according to that very book. We don't tolerate nothing that in any way, if somebody is lying about what the Bible teaches, sometimes people teach things and they're just wrong, right? And they just really believe it. And it's not like they're lying. I mean, they may be wrong, but it's not like they're trying to deceive you. They just really believe it. And it's like you got to convince them out of it, right? That's not really what I'm talking about. Craig Little is either far too stupid to be in this discussion, and I don't think he is, right? I mean, what he said was incredibly stupid and dumb and blasphemous, right? Is unacceptable. Unacceptable in the context of our discussion. Incorrect completely, right? He basically saying everything in Revelation is in the future when that's not what it is, right? When they get to the visions about the future, that's when John says, you could read the book yourself. It's very obvious, right? In fact, he doesn't even refer to the Lord's Day until verse 10. And in verse 5, he's still giving greetings to John and is referred to as the ruler of the kings of the earth, the firstborn, right? This is all present. This is all happening right now to John. And he's being given. Being in the Lord's day doesn't project you into the future. We don't do time travel here. He's receiving visions about the future, which is all over the place in Revelation, right? But not before he is talking to John and the Christians. Anyone who seriously believes, let alone falsely promotes the belief that Revelation chapters 1 through 3, at least, are only future is a liar or an incompetent person who shouldn't even be speaking about the Bible. I don't think Craig Little is that. I think he's just so beholden to false doctrine and Watchtower beliefs and is right. We've got family. We've got friends. These are not easy things to give up. They're hard. It can be tough. So, did you think this was just going to be so easy that you wouldn't have to make any sacrifices? I've made massive sacrifices. I'm not. I've had to go through the very thing many of you are afraid to go through, and it's not pleasant. But it'll be easier. It'll be easier now because you have had others show you the way today. How not only to avoid false teachers and liars, like the current Watchtower leadership, but to continue worshiping the biblical God, right? A lot of people have been able to leave the Watchtower. Is that all we want? No, that's not what I want. I want people who are in the Watchtower because they believe in God, because they believe in Jesus, because they believe in the Bible. I want all of those people to continue to believe those things. I just don't want you to continue to believe things that are not taught in the Bible. That's it. That's only going to make it better for you in terms of your relationship with God and Jesus. Yeah, it's going to affect your relationships with other people who are committed to more than that. Sorry, that is what happens. That's what Jesus had to go through. That's what Christians go through. That's who we are. Yeah, I mean, we hope we get to keep all of our family and friends and all that stuff, right? At the end of the day, as we're going to read in a moment, it's between us and Jesus and God. That's it. No one else is going to be there with you. When God and Jesus have you before them, you're not going to be thinking about anybody else. So try not to think so much about the people who aren't going to be there with you then, right now. That doesn't mean you ignore them, avoid them or anything. I'm just saying that they're not the most important. None of us are. How could we be? It's the Father. Look at Jesus, right? Look at how he acted. Look at what he had to go through. Even though he was perfect and able to do it, it was probably more difficult than it will ever be for any of us. So we know we're ultimately going to have to die. Or, right, we could be caught away. There's always those possibilities. But the fact is, we have to prepare for death, everyone. No, we don't have to go around thinking about it all the time. Hey, maybe we will just keep living. You need to be prepared. The best way for you to do that is for us to teach what's true. Now, what about people who have died? Right? What about people who have died in these different groups? Right now, we're all kind of seeing these things. Maybe some of you for the first time, maybe even Craig Little, even though his contribution yesterday was horrific and unacceptable and basically a lie about the book of Revelation. You want to get me fired up? Lie about the Bible. Tell me something that's not true about the Bible that's so obvious and clear. It's obvious and clear. You're just doing it for your own selfish benefit. You're just lying about something you know you can't defend so that you can defend what you otherwise can't defend. You see? If the lie is just to protect something that you don't have anything true to support, that's bad, right? That's like the worst. Now, you may not be the worst person ever, right? You may, in one sense, be wicked or acting like an evil slave by doing such things or other things. You can change. I don't hold anything against anyone permanently. Not even Sam Shamoon, right? Right? A repeated blasphemer and noted false teacher and liar. If Sam right now he's being managed by Satan right now. He's been handed over by me and by Dr. White and by others who just have had it with Sam. Right? He's beyond our ability to manage at this point, and so we had to hand him over. So he's going through what has to be done, and anyone who repents, anyone who changes, we have to accept, because we're really no better ultimately in terms of our guilt, right? Unless we've committed the unforgivable sin, which is something God and Jesus will determine. We can't determine that. I can't determine that for Watchtower people or Craig Little or Sam Shamoon or whoever, right? Nor do I even want to. I'll call things as I see them when they're happening, because that's what we're supposed to do, right? It's totally different, like when I was dealing with Craig Little or Sam Shamoon, than what Peter talks about, right? Always be ready to give a defense for people who demand a reason for the hope in you, together with mildness and deep respect. Yeah, but Craig Little wasn't asking me for the reasons for my hope. I had already given them. He was contradicting my reasons with false teachings, lies, absolute, obvious, and clear misrepresentation of the book of Revelation, right? Where there's like major warnings attached to this message. You don't play around with this message. And if anyone plays around with this message, you're going to find out real fast, I'm not playing around with you or this message. I'm always willing to forgive, and I hope people will change. But if you're going to keep lying in God's name, and you're going to contradict me during a presentation of truthful information just so you can protect a false doctrine, if you know this channel and me at all, you know how that's going to go. And I have every right to do so. You can look at the text that I pinned on yesterday's video or many others. I did a whole video, in fact, about this issue and how Jesus confronted people, like the scribes and Pharisees, right? They weren't really demanding a reason for him. Some of them were at sometimes, but they were really just dishonest people trying to contradict him, right? They were trying to contradict him, not wanting to learn, most of them. That's why he condemned them in such harsh terms. That's why Paul condemns certain false teachers and people, because they're not asking him for a reason for the hope within him, right? They're openly contradicting what has already been presented with lies. At that point, we either, right, if I'm like dealing with him one-on-one somewhere, I'd probably just walk away, right? I'd not have to deal with a person who's idiotic and who's going to present something so stupid. What's the point of talking to him, right? If you can't see that Revelation 1 through 3 is Jesus talking to John through the angel and the Christians and the different first century congregations, there's nothing I can do. You're done, right? You are 100% done and finished for now. Maybe later you'll figure it out, but there's nothing I can do. And I'm certainly not going to tolerate or countenance that kind of behavior or attempt to deceive people while I'm speaking, right? So you really need to check yourself. If you're going to come here on this channel, especially during a live stream, and offer lies and ridiculous understandings of the text that I'm presenting, hey, if you make a good comment or something, or you point out an area of a verse, well, yeah, that's what we're here for. That's not what happened, right? That's not at all what happened. So it got me to thinking, well, this is tough for people. This is not, hey, we all need to deal with the facts and the truth and not be babies, like I said. Okay, we should be mature and grown up at this point, no matter how difficult it may be in some areas of our life because of what we want to stand for. What's it going to be? How long is it going to take the rest of you to make this decision? Many of us have already decided we're going this way. We're going the worship the Father in spirit and truth way. We're going honor the Son as you honor the Father, because he's been elevated to the position in heaven by the Father to the Father's glory, and treating each other the way we want to be treated. We're going that way. And we're going to let people decide all these other things in terms of what they want to do with their personal life and what they want to celebrate and how often they want to get together. And we're not going to require people to do what we want you to do. You're not my slave. You're not my servant. And I'm not yours in that same way, right? I am here serving. I am in your midst serving, doing these things, just like Jesus did that. I'm not Jesus, but I'm imitating him, right? That's what we're supposed to do. I'm the one taking the time and doing what I can without requiring anything of you to help us grow stronger, to help us understand the things we need to know to get this stuff done and to survive, or if we die, to do what we believed was right. So what, though, about those people who, like I just said, believed they were doing what was right, but were doing so not like we are now, right? We've woken up in many ways, and we've seen certain things, and we realize now, okay, here's how this is supposed to be done. What about the people who can't do that? It's just that for whatever reason, right? No matter what we think a person should do or be able to do, we know it's not easy. We know everyone can do this, right? God always makes it possible for us to get what is correct done. We're the ones who create complications, or we're born into situations that make it complicated until we can unravel the situation enough to get out, or to get to where we need to be, wherever we end up being born and how we're raised, right? There's different circumstances that we find ourselves in. Okay, so all that said, we know we know it should be done, but we know it's hard. Not everyone can do it. What happens then? What happens if people stay in the Watchtower, for example, and keep, praising God and telling people about Jesus, following the golden rule to the extent that they can, but they still believe in, and or, right, I guess you don't have to believe, for example, in the 1914 chronology and birth of the kingdom, but we'll just use both examples. Let's say you do or don't believe, but you're in the organization, and regardless of whether you believe in 1914 or not, you're in it because you just see them as the best, most visible type of group, even though those are not characteristics we're given. Right? The Bible doesn't say, find the biggest group that represents what seems to be mostly true. And I'm not even sure that would make the Watchtower qualify, right? Because, again, even though they have some critical things that are true, correct, they have a lot of things that are not, like a lot of things, right? Prophecy, chronology, medical stuff, holidays, all this stuff, right? Just all kinds of stuff. How often you should have to go out in the ministry, how many meetings you have to attend to. There's all kinds of stuff, man. So the question is, what would happen to you or anyone if you died as a member of, for example, the Watchtower in their current state, or maybe even, we'll say 40 years ago, 30 years ago, right? When, let's say during like the 90s, 80s, 90s, generation thing was still kind of in play, and there was just a lot of stuff. The organization was still pretty unique in terms of the divine name and everything, right? We weren't really doing what we were doing now. There were a lot of circumstantial things you could look at and understand how a person would pick the organization. And so let's say that happened, right? Even though, as we believe now and can clearly show, things like 1914 are not correct, right? The whole appointment in 1919, not correct, right? There's a lot of stuff here that's pretty serious, right? Jesus says that you are not to go after those who say the end is near. Watchtower, So there's some like big stuff there, right? We got the blood issue. There's some big deals there, right? And then there's the good stuff. Same with like the Catholics, right? Different stuff, but you've got your pros and your cons. You've got some things that are correct. You've got a lot of things that are wrong. What happens to all these people? Are you just done? If we didn't get out of the Watchtower, would we have, no matter how sincere we were, would be longing to a group that promotes false teachings, like obvious, right? We're not talking about, something could or could not be true. I'm talking about things that are explicitly not true. Trinity, 1914, appointment as the faithful slave in 1919, governing body, right? We've shown that was not happening the way they make it out to be. Not even close, right? There was no central authority deciding all these things at all. There's just a couple of times they came together to resolve things. And even Paul said, the way Paul spoke about many of those same people very clearly shows that is not what was going on at all. Right? Popes, right? All these different popes and all the different idols and things, right? My little children, guard yourselves from... So we can clearly see that a lot of Christian groups, most of them, the big ones, right? The more noticeable ones, a lot of Christian groups have this problem. What's going to happen? can you be saved being part of one of those different groups? And what are we to make of people that may have died that are family members, friends, right? Let's take a look at a couple texts. This isn't going to be a really long video. I only have a few texts, and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll pretty much just wrap it up. But I wanted to talk about it because I understand. I thought about it, and I do. Of course, we all should, and I think do realize the difficulties that we're facing with some of these choices and how we're going to, how are we going to proceed worshiping God and following Jesus and get along with all these other people that believe all this other stuff too? Right? I mean, we could go to people in the Watchtower and say, yeah, I believe in Jehovah, believe in Jesus, golden rule. Do you listen to the society? No, I don't follow them. Oh, well, you're apostate. You're out of here. Right? I mean, so it wouldn't make any difference. Wouldn't make any difference to a Watchtower member if you said, I believe in Jehovah God, one God the Father, Jesus, firstborn Son of God, Michael the Archangel. Even if you do it, they believe that. And I believe it too, but not every Christian witness of Jada. So either way, you could agree with them on that. You agree with them on the golden rule. The second you tell them you don't accept a faithful and discreet slave as the governing body, representative of the governing body, that's it, right? It's over. You're not going to be saved. I believe most Watchtower people, if you went up to them and said, I believe in Jehovah God, one God the Father, Jesus, firstborn Son, Michael, all that's the same as you, golden rule. Can we, worship together and go witness to people? Well, what congregation do you go to? Are you an active member of the organization? Do you accept the governing body as a faithful slave? No, I don't participate in the Watchtower organization, but I believe in the same God as you. Jehovah, Father, one God, no Trinity. And I believe in the same Messiah. Exactly, firstborn, first creation, Michael, yeah. And I treat people the same way you say we should. Golden rule. Yeah, but you don't accept the governing body as appointed by Jesus in 1919? No, I don't accept that. Am I wrong? I think the majority of Watchtower people would do that. There'd be almost no way you could really associate with them in a ministerial way, other than kind of like you're right. I realize a lot of you may be exceptions to that, and you're here and we're doing. But I'm not talking about the people here. I'm talking about the majority of people who just participate in these organized groups that have false teachings. They've got some truths. They've got false teachings. What happens to them? Right? So they would probably reject us for some of these false teachings. And obviously they do. So to them, right, and Catholics, I don't know so much of how much they would see that. I think there would definitely be a disapproval, right, if we rejected the Pope and all that stuff. Or Trinity, right? If we told Protestants who believe in the Trinity and Catholics that, yeah, we worship God of the Bible and we believe in Jesus, the Holy Spirit. Do you believe in the Trinity? No. Trinity came about later in association with a pagan emperor and a bunch of false teachers and liars who contradicted the Bible. So I don't believe that. Or maybe don't say it that way, right? Do you believe in the Trinity? No, I don't believe in the Trinity, but I believe in God, the Father, Jesus, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Do you believe in the Trinity? No. You're a heretic. Condemned to hell. If you're talking to Sam Shamoon, right? He gets pretty condemnatory. And a lot of people do. And Watchtower people, as I just said, you do too. You'd pretty much probably see anyone who rejected the faithful slave as apostate, right? Even though, as I said yesterday, you guys are the apostates. We've concluded. That's clear now. Okay, so can you be in an apostate organization, right? Catholics, but this doesn't mean everybody's a bad person, right? I'm not using apostate necessarily the way the Watchtower people do, right? Like this horrifically evil person. I just mean that they've fallen away, like the way the word actually, what it really means, right? They're not following the Bible. a little bit, but not exclusively. They've fallen away from following the Bible if you're Catholic or if you're Watchtower, because some of the things you require people to believe to be accepted are not in the Bible. Trinity, 1914. Right? So I kind of get the feeling that people in those groups over those issues would probably say, we're done. We're going to be in hell. Not in a good way. But what's really the case? Is that how it is? Is it just that simple? If you're not in this group or that group or just teaching as we teach, everyone else is done? Let's take a look at the Bible. Let me go ahead and bring up NWT, which we use frequently because I know it very well, and I actually believe it's the best English Bible out there. Watchtower, you did good work right there. Good job with the NWT, 1984 and earlier, but mainly the 1984, I would say. But you get credit for that. Always give you credit for that, right? Just because I think you guys are apostates, that doesn't mean you didn't do a good job with the Bible. Nice job. Should have just kept going that way, right? But, that doesn't mean, in my view, that you're permanently that way. Just because the Watchtower Society has apostatized from the Bible, is that any different from the Jews of Jesus' day? Right? They had basically apostatized from the teaching of the text and were adding their own things. They were invalidating God's word according to Jesus. I would say that's pretty bad, right? It's like, if you're invalidating God's word, I think you've apostatized at that point. You've fallen away from it. If you put on the pretense that you're being religious and following it and you're not, well, I think you would qualify as an apostate there. So, we're not using right when the Watchtower uses it, it's like the death knell, right? It's like when they call you an apostate, it's like you are basically dead. They have judged you with finality, and you might as well just kill yourself. Or repent, I guess, right? But I mean, they will, if you turn on the Watchtower, it doesn't matter if you believe in Jehovah God or Jesus exactly as they do. You turn on the Watchtower, you're an apostate, according to them in the biblical sense. When nothing in the Bible in any way talks about the Watchtower or what it teaches. In fact, it clearly contradicts it in many significant ways. And so once again, but they think they're the truth, right? They basically think they are Jesus, right? They're the truth. There's nowhere else to go. No one else to whom to go. God and Jesus completely trust them. And by the way, I put that link to the Stephen Lett video that I played the audio from in my We Need to Talk About This, Watchtower Jehovah's Witnesses. I put that in the link to that video if you want to watch it in full. And I watched it again, and he starts out that talk saying that we should have complete trust in Jehovah God. And then he goes on and says we should have complete trust in the governing body, faithful slave. And that, of course, God and Jesus trust them completely, 100%. So in his mind, we completely trust Jehovah and we completely trust them. There's no difference. What's the difference? I don't see how there does not appear to be any difference. We're basically supposed to accept them as God on earth, as absolute authority, 100%, total submission, no alternative views, no questioning, no testing. Are you kidding? Revelation 2:2? That's not happening in Watchtower. They have insulated themselves against all that. Even so, could you belong to a group like that, die, and be resurrected to life, not judgment? We'll get to it in a moment. What about the Catholics, right? If you can do that in the Watchtower, if you can be a member of the Watchtower and praise God and follow Jesus, do the best you can to treat other people well, but you also promote and teach a lot of this false doctrine, really bad doctrine. Well, if you can do that, why wouldn't a Catholic be able to worship God the way they understand him in a way that's not true, but it's similar to you, Watchtower people, and that you want us to accept the governing body and trust them completely the way we trust Jehovah God, and that Jehovah God and Jesus trust them completely. You want us to believe that, but you don't have any evidence for it. You just believe it and you want us to believe it, and if we don't believe it, we're dead. Same with Trinitarians. Yet neither one of those have any explicit evidence in the text. So you want us to believe all that stuff, right? Okay, so if you Watchtower people, if you can believe all that false stuff about, completely trusting humans that the Bible explicitly tells us not to trust, if we can go after people who say the end is near, even though Jesus explicitly warned us not to do that, if we can promote false dates and false chronology, even though the Bible says we're not even supposed to be writing about that stuff or getting excited about it, if you can violate all of that, right, that's a lot, that's pretty significant stuff that you're doing, Watchtower people. It's like explicit violations of major areas of doctrine. Well, if you can do that and get away with it, why wouldn't the Catholics be able to get away with the Trinity because they're using it to try to explain monotheism in a way that makes sense to them? It's not correct. Stuff you're doing is not correct by far too. You're both using Bibles, you're both promoting Jesus, and you're both teaching false doctrine. Like major false doctrine, right? But Watchtower people, you basically believe that you're still the best overall representation, even, you have the most truth. That could be debated, I believe. But it wouldn't make any difference ultimately because, as I've said before, you wouldn't be any better than the Jews of Jesus' day at the most, right? Because they have all the same core teachings that you did, basically, than rejecting the Messiah. But if you went a little bit before he came, they were still doing all those things wrong. They were still invalidating God's word before Jesus was born. And they were still worshiping the one God of the Bible. They were still believing in the Messiah, right? So you can have a lot of significant truths and be totally rejected because of the things you do wrong and not changing that. It's not so much just doing something wrong, right? We all do that. But when you're presented with information, when you're presented with facts, not feelings, not interpretations, but facts, you're not, what excuse could there be for rejecting that would be acceptable to God and Jesus? Well, I can think of a couple, right? Maybe you're weak. Maybe it's just hard for you to accept the truth at that time. Like, look at Peter, right? He was under great stress, a little bit unique circumstance, but clearly he lied 3 times. And then he got over it and he was restored, right? He was able to get past that because he didn't keep lying. And it's not like he continued denying the Christ. But he did do it. Right? He did it at the worst time too, right? When he really needed people there. So there are things that are big deals that we all do because we're all sinners and we're all going to make mistakes, and that should be accepted, or we're never going to be approved, right? If we can't accept people for their mistakes and things. But when you keep doing something, when you're not stopping the mistake, when you continue promoting what is error, and you're not even trying to change, right? You really believe and are promoting a teaching that has no explicit evidence and that can be contradicted with explicit evidence. That's not a good place to be. So how are we going to, if we've got these kinds of issues in different groups, and then people in these different groups who are doing the best they can and trying to please God, but they have all these other issues in these different groups, whether it's Trinity 1914. Can people be in these groups and finish out their earthly life and be resurrected? Right? I mean, we could always ask, could people in these groups, in these situations where you have truth and error, and they're basically promoting both, could they be anointed? It's a separate question, right? Could they be people who are caught away to be with the Lord if they're teaching things like the Trinity? If when the Lord arrives and gives the commanding call, those are already dead in union with Christ, they rise, right? Could you be one of those who rises if you believed in the Trinity? Could you be one of those who rises if you believed in 1914? Let's take a look. And it's not just at that point, right? Because you have the 1 Thessalonians 4 descent, where Jesus brings to life those who are dead in union with him and gathers those Christians living at that time with him. But then, after the 1,000 years, all the dead are brought up. The resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous. Just like Revelation 20 says, at the end of the 1,000 years, the rest of the dead. I did a whole video on it. Watch it. See what you think. But it's very clear. Again, it's explicit. After the 1,000 years have ended, the rest of the dead come to life. And then right after that is exactly what John is shown in vision. Future, Craig Little, future vision. All the dead are raised up. We're going to read it. We're going to read basically 3, maybe 4 texts. Here's the first one. John chapter 5. John 5, 28, 29. I've talked about this text in the video I was referencing. First death, first resurrection, second resurrection. I encourage you to take a look at that if you want more extended discussion of some of these texts and issues. I'm not going to get off on it extendedly right now, though. So here Jesus says, do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out. Those who did good things to a resurrection of life. Those who practice vile things to a resurrection of judgment. Now that's very interesting, right? Because we know we can't earn salvation. But, as I explained in that very video, while the wages of sin are death, the reward God gives is life. And everyone who dies is resurrected to be given that judgment of death or life, right? So God can override the wages of sin and gift you life because he likes the things you did even though a sinner, like Joseph. Versus someone like Cain, who embraced his sin and ran with it, right? And enjoyed it, and didn't avoid practicing a vile thing even though he was a sinner, or feel repentant in a way where he tried to appease God. He more so was just upset because of the punishment, right? Big difference between Joseph and Cain. And that would be how I would represent the type of people we're talking about here. But that doesn't mean Joseph was perfect, right? Of course not. Nobody is perfect. We're not going to get everything right. The question is, can we get a lot of really important things wrong and still be resurrected? Well, it doesn't say, right? It says those who did good things. Well, we know everyone who has done a good thing, right? Like Joseph, he resisted Potiphar's wife, good thing, right? He didn't violate his master's wife, even though she was trying to violate him. It's a good thing right there, Joseph. But we also know Joseph also did bad things, right? I mean, we're not like told a lot about him, but he died. He's the son of Adam. So, like Jesus said, no one is good. We might do good things like Joseph, but we're not good. No. That's why the governing body's making such a huge mistake asking people to trust them completely. Well, that's what they really want. I don't think it's a mistake. I think at this point, my opinion, Watchtower people, is your current leadership is toast. They've been corrupted. They're either totally deceived in ways that are reckless and that would be endangering to you to believe them or follow them, or they are really dishonest, vile people who are knowingly teaching this stuff to control you for their own selfish gain. And if you don't think that's possible, Watchtower people, you've already lost. It's possible. It's not only possible, it's likely. It's almost inevitable. Look what happened to the Jews. Look what happened to the Christians. The idea that any group or person wouldn't be subject to corruption or failure is, again, not a scriptural teaching. Like Jesus, why do you call me good? Yet the society wants us to call them faithful and discreet. It's not too far from good. And we have to trust them completely, right? I mean, you better be good. If you want 100%. So like you'd have to be almost above Jesus that point, because he said it's not him. He's not good. It's the Father. He deferred to the Father. Watchtower Society doesn't always do that, right? It's always right on par. Trust the society, trust them, they trust them. It's all this just mutual, equal trust. So we've got, I think a lot of you, right? You know that's not a good place to be for those reasons, but maybe it's good for you for now because it gives you a way to keep your faith going, and that's important. No one wants you to just collapse, right? That's why I say, but see, Watchtower people, you know how when I do these Trinity talks and everything, and I say, we don't want Trinitarians to lose their faith. A lot of you do. A lot of you actually do. You really don't like Trinitarians at all, some of you. You guys have become like two sports teams that hate each other. And so it creates a unique situation, right? So it doesn't say the people who do good things, who are resurrected to life, never do anything bad. That wouldn't even be possible, right? So we know for a fact, this group right here, those who did good things, we know for a fact they did a lot of bad. Every human does, differing degrees, but nobody is good. And that's straight from the Messiah's mouth. So even though they did good things, they still are doing some things bad. All right. So at what point does the bad being done by the people who do good become vile? Right? At what point does our sin or mistakes or error reach that level? Well, other than the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, which even then is right, we can't really decide this. This is not for us to decide. We do have to decide what to believe and who to associate with, and we have to make judgments, I'll put in quotes, in terms of the quality of person we perceive someone to be based on what they show us in their works and speech, so that we associate with people of like faith and mind, right? But that doesn't mean, for example, if I didn't think someone was a moral person or teaching the truth in areas that really mattered, that doesn't mean I can determine with finality whether or not that person is going to be considered good, practicer of good, or a practicer of vile. It might be someone who's just making a lot of mistakes, but who did enough good things not to merit salvation. That's not possible. but to motivate God to want to give you a gift, life. You deserve death. That's the wages of the sin that we've all committed. But even though you or me or Joseph were a sinner, did some bad things, you resisted that desire. You didn't cultivate that desire so that you began to practice sin willfully in a way that led to vile actions and an unrepentant heart. I can't determine that. Can you determine that? How are you going to determine that? I mean, there's some things, right? If you see certain degrees of activity that's considered vile, like someone's murdering and stealing and lying and doing the things that are condemned in the Bible, doesn't mean individual acts of that kind can't be done and then overcome. We're talking about practice, right? We're talking about what you're choosing to do regularly, not what you succumb to do infrequently. That happens. And when that happens and we feel bad about our mistake, if we make the effort to become better, not do it again, or at least so regularly that it's a practice, that's who we are. We're sinners. We're going to make mistakes. But what are we promoting, right? What would be considered vile? So we know lies are in there, definitely, right? No, even Revelation, we'll see some of the text, but lying is vile. Peter lied, right? So we're not talking about certain circumstances where, even though it's wrong, that can never be considered correct on Peter's part. Lying about the Messiah 3 times when he needed him the most. Never. Is Peter vile? Obviously not, right? Because he was appointed as an apostle after that. So Jesus and the Father already know we have within us the capability of doing some pretty bad stuff. And we're going to, and we already have done some pretty bad stuff, just like Peter. Maybe not even as bad as Peter. But if Peter could be approved and used, even though he lied 3 times about the Messiah, it's clear to me that there is a range of behavior that, while not acceptable, doesn't reach the level of vile practice deserving of this kind of judgment. Now it says everyone comes out, right? And you're going to see that's true again in Revelation, but that's important for us to remember. The people who do the good things and who get life, they still did bad things too. Even some vile things at times. But there was a degree to which they didn't rise in their behavior that these people chose to do. Let's take a look at another text, Romans. We're going to look at Romans, Revelation, and maybe one text in Daniel, and then we'll wrap it up and we're done. Try to make this one a little briefer. But I don't think of time when I do these. I just cover the material. Sometimes the material is short, sometimes it's long. When I'm talking about a subject like the Watchtower and God's Kingdom in 1914, probably going to be a little long. There's a lot that needs to be said and considered, and it's not just a quick, in and out type thing. Sometimes we need to talk about it. Romans chapter 1. And I think this is important because we came down, pretty hard on Watchtower yesterday for good reason. That has to happen, everybody. That's why we got into this position in the first place. Because we couldn't do that before. We can do it now. I'm doing it now. But it's not confronting people who are teaching what's false that's gotten us into this. That's why Jesus commended the Ephesian Christians who put to the test those who were making special claims and found out they were lying. That's what he wants us to do. So it's very important for us to keep that in mind. Now, let's take a look at Romans 1:16. We're going to read verses 16 through 2:11. Very important stuff here. You ready? Here we go. For I am not ashamed of the good news. It is, in fact, God's power for salvation to everyone having faith, to the Jew first, also to the Greek. For in it God's righteousness is being revealed by reason of faith and toward faith, just as it is written, but the righteous one, by means of faith, he will live. For God's wrath is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who are suppressing the truth in an unrighteous way. This is why I got so upset with Craig Little yesterday. I should have actually, it's hard to say how I mean, I think it was totally appropriate. Because he was suppressing the truth in an unrighteous way. Now, you can repent, Craig. You can change. That was a vile act. That's the kind of act that God's wrath is coming to you for. And so what I did yesterday was exactly what had to happen. That's what hopefully will shake the Craig Littles of the world into their senses so they don't have to experience that. It doesn't benefit me at all. It just made some people sympathetic with Craig think I was being mean to him when I wasn't. He was being mean to me and to God and to Jesus and to everybody else by suppressing the truth in an unrighteous way, by lying so blatantly and obviously about what was being taught. It was absurd, asinine, extremely stupid, or dishonest. And it's exactly what it says here God's wrath is coming against. That's why I had to be so harsh with it. It's very serious. Because what may be known about God is manifest among them. Right there in Revelation, there's no excuse for what we had happen yesterday. For God made it manifest to them. Here, of course, we're talking about creation, as we'll see, but still, right? What may be known about God is manifest among them. That's true in the text, too. Don't we believe that the text reveals or manifests what we know about God? You're not supposed to be suppressing the truth of the Bible just to protect false doctrine. So we really need to be sure, right? Whether we're in the Watchtower or Catholics or Protestant groups or Mormons or whatever, if you want to do that, right, if you want to take the chance of being a part of a group that has this sort of mixed bag, where you're just you're going with the group that has like the best ratio of good to bad in it type thing, although we're 100%, right? We don't have any bad. We're just the three things explicitly taught in the Bible. Either way, we're not as big or well known yet as those other groups, and I don't really care if we are or not. It's not what it's about. The fact is, you don't want to be a part of any group, small or large, that is suppressing the truth in an unrighteous way. You got to watch that, right? It says right here, God's wrath is coming against that. This is a big deal, right? We're kind of getting into the issues, and we're seeing where it's possible maybe to be a part of these groups in ways where you still are doing some things that are wrong, but you're not quite vile in the sense that Jesus talked about in John 5. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're still going to be approved, right? If the mixed bag of pros and cons, false things and true things, if it includes certain things, right? If the group you're in isn't just misled, or it's hard to make that determination, right? So it's like, how would we determine that? We can't. We cannot determine. Sometimes we can, right? Certain people act certain ways. By the fruit you'll know them. And then you can see, oh, okay, I see your line right there. But often it's just not that easy, right? When you're looking at Stephen Ladd or Garrett Loesch, these guys don't look that sinister or vile. He's kind of nice and joke, whatever. I could talk. They're not like evil looking. But that doesn't talk about that here, does it? Does it say anything about what they look like or how, how nice they may be? That's what it says. That's why we have to look beyond those other things. Remember Eve in the Garden of Eden? I'm sure the serpent at that point was just fine, right? There was no reason for them to distrust it or fear it. She clearly didn't fear it at that time. He was able to converse with her openly. So he probably seemed very pleasant, right? Obviously, if she listened to him and did what he suggested to her, she wasn't that concerned about the serpent. But what was the serpent doing? Suppressing the truth in an unrighteous way. So, to me, that's probably the most difficult part for people, is this connection that we make with others that makes it hard for us to believe they're lying. It's hard to believe, right? We hear you saying that Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust you. You seem like, it seems nice. You seem like you really mean that. It seems like nothing doesn't sound harsh or anything. A little smile there. Jehovah God and Jesus Christ completely trust us. So, shouldn't we do the same? It seems kind of nice. No. No, we shouldn't. I don't care how nice you are. Go, great, you're nice. You're also wrong. You're nice and wrong. So what am I going to do? Ignore the fact that you're wrong because you're nice? Or ignore the fact that you're nice because you're wrong? I think that's what Eve should have done. Verse 19, because what may be known about God is manifest among them. We read that. God is manifest to him. Verse 20, for his invisible qualities are clearly seen from the world's creation onward, because they are perceived by the things made, even his eternal power and Godship, so that they are inexcusable. And it would be the same for explicit biblical teachings, right? Just as explicit and clear as the creation, evidencing God's power and intelligence and design. Biblical text for us, explicit teachings, right? Word for word stuff, inexcusable, right? It's like, what are you talking about? It's right there. One God the Father. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God nor thank him, but they became empty-headed in their reasonings, and their unintelligent heart became darkened. Although asserting they were wise, they became foolish. Verse 23, and turned the glory of the incorruptible God into something like the image of corruptible man. And of birds and four-footed creatures and creeping things. Verse 24, therefore God, in keeping with the desires of their hearts, gave them up to uncleanness, that their bodies might be dishonored among them. Right? Like the homos and lesbos and all that stuff, right? This is what they choose to do. You homos, I know many homos. It's very clear. We've talked about it. You guys know what you're doing. No excuse. Right? If your rectum's bleeding after intimacy, you've been abused. So that's what it's talking about, right? It says that their heart became darkened, and he gave them up to uncleanness, that their bodies might be dishonored. If you're being anally abused, you're being dishonored. That's a dishonor. Your anus wasn't meant for that, right? But the desires of their heart motivate them to do it, right? It mocks God, right? He didn't make your anus for that. He made the vagina and the penis for very specific things, as well as the anus. And when you confuse those two and damage yourselves just so you can simulate what's done with one and not supposed to be done with the other, you're dishonored. You're unclean. And your bodies are going to suffer. Even those who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and venerated and rendered sacred service to the creation rather than the one who created it, who is blessed forever. Amen. Okay. Right? So this exchanging the truth of God for a lie is never okay, is it? No. How could it be? Well, we already know up here, right? We're not supposed to suppress the truth in an unrighteous way. And we know we're not obviously exchange the truth of God for a lie. Does anyone disagree with that? Okay. So again, lying is a big deal. It's come up several times here in Romans in association with what the wrath of God is coming toward and what being given up to the uncleanliness of to uncleanliness and being dishonored in the body, right? Those who venerate the creation versus the creator are exchanging the truth for the lie. Well, we could look at that in a similar way with, for example, the Catholics and the way they clearly put the Pope and religious figures in their organization on an elevated pedestal, right? Venerating Mary and saints in ways that the Bible does not support when they should be giving the honor to God. They basically are venerating the creation, right? Popes, Mary, saints. You can look at the Mormons. They have their prophets. They have different levels of heaven. I mean, that levels of heaven may not necessarily involve venerating creation, but certainly having this sort of prophet type person in there that is viewed specially in ways where I don't think any one of us can even think of a Mormon prophecy. Can you? Have you ever heard of a Mormon prophet give a prophecy that came true? I haven't. You have one that you can show me. I'd sure like to see it. But there's certainly veneration in some sense going on there. Or for Joseph Smith, right? They clearly venerate Joseph Smith as someone special and a prophet in ways that don't line up with the facts. Right? They should be venerating God, not exchanging truth for lie. Right? Watchtower, you would agree with that. So what about the governing body? Are they not being venerated? I mean, we have to completely trust them the same way as God and Jesus, because complete is complete. And if you watch that talk by Let, he starts out, as I said, saying we completely trust Jehovah. And then not too long after, he says that Jehovah and Jesus completely trust them, and we should completely trust them. So there's no difference. But it says right here, there's clearly a difference. Venerating the creation versus the creator. That should be something we are so careful of not doing. I mean, and the ones who are most faithful and loyal to the text among us should be setting that example. They should be going out of their way to make it clear, you don't venerate me or us, no. You worship God the Father, you follow Jesus the Messiah, and we work together by helping each other to get through this. And when we fall, you help me up. When I fall, when you fall, I help you up. When I fall, you help me up. I think I got both in there. We help each other. We're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. But we don't lie. And if we do lie, like Peter, we stop it. We feel bad. It bothers us, and we despair, and we wake up. Forgive me. That was wrong. And we stop doing it. And if it happens again, it's like, oh no, right? Check something real quick. Henry, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm gonna pop. Let me put my chat where I can see it a little better. Although I'm not gonna get too into it right. It seems like you guys are doing fine. But I saw Henry's super chat, and I try to acknowledge those. Thanks, Henry. Good to see you all, by the way. Let's see what we got here. Bankhead, Answorth Tree, Jason Blue Jay, 84. Slave to Truth. It's good. Slave to Truth. Forest for Truth. Slave for Truth and Forest for Truth. I wonder if that's like a pink moon, purple rain kind of tandem thing we'll have going there, right? I haven't seen pink moon or purple rain in a while. George Lopez, always good to have you there, George. Miro was tucked in there. So I want to just say hi to everybody there. So let's get back to these texts now. All right, we're in Romans 1:20. Let's go to 1:26 now. So keep that in mind, right? We don't want to exchange the truth for the lie. We don't want to venerate the creation versus the creator. These are big deals. We're trying to determine whether or not we can make the kinds of mistakes it would be these kinds of big deals, right? Because essentially this is kind of happening, whether it's the Catholics, the Mormons, or the Watchtower, right? In some sense, different Protestant groups, while they don't maybe venerate in the same level as the ones I just mentioned, there's this scholarly class that's definitely looked to, but I don't think in the same way as Watchtower Mormons or Catholics. It's kind of teeters on there sometimes with some people, but either way, we want to be careful not to fall into that. I don't know. It doesn't matter how many things we can do wrong and still be given life. How many chances do we want to take, everybody? I mean, how much are we trying to get away with and then just hope it works out? That's not a good plan. It's not a good plan to just see how much you can get away with, though. So we want to make sure we're doing as much correct as possible. Period. But we know it's tough at times, and for many of us, it's nowhere else to really go right now in a way where we feel like there's association in the sense that, well, we may not need it, right? 2 or more, but it's there and it makes it easier, and we know a lot of people. So how much of this can we get involved with either Watchtower, Catholics, Mormons, or even Protestant groups, right? Because Trinity and other false teachings that they would require us to believe, even if they didn't have things like a governing body or a pope or something like that, we'd still have to believe in false doctrine. So how much of that is acceptable? What of all that false doctrine, popes, Catholic stuff, Watchtower stuff, Trinity stuff, how much of that can be accepted and us still be resurrected? Or people that maybe we knew in the past, family members, others, maybe right now, right? Maybe we're aware of the problems, for example, with the Watchtower, and we're like, wait a minute, no, I'm not going to fully support them the way my dad or my mom or my brothers did. And that's not a good feeling. My mom and dad were members of the society, mostly my mom, but my family was pretty much raised in it. So all of this was difficult. I lost my whole family, my sisters, my brothers, they all basically shunned me. I haven't talked to them in decades. A little over a decade. So that's just the way it is. I can't change it. I can't force them to talk to me or think like me. But I'm not going to ignore what I know is true just because they don't see it or believe it. That's why we have this situation. Remember what Jesus said? I came to put a sword between family members, and he made it very clear that the people who are his real family, right? He had to go through that, right? We don't really appreciate that because we're not on that level, but could you imagine the kind of difficulty and damage that Satan and the demons were able to accomplish on a temporary level, and the disruptions of activities in the heavens, not to mention the earth? So sometimes it's just necessary. What are you going to do? Do we just want people to like us so much and want to be with people so much that we're going to exchange the truth for a lie? Is that all it takes? It can, right? Peter, he did that, but then he stopped. Right? He did do that. We've all done that at some point. But are we going to stop? At what point are we going to stop? At what point do we have to stop, or we're not going to, it's not going to be enough, right? And not be enough in terms of earning. I mean, God accepting us and choosing to give us a gift that we don't deserve because he recognizes the good things we did in spite of being sinful people. John 5. Let's keep going. That is why God gave them up to disgraceful sexual appetites, for both their females changed the natural use of themselves into one contrary to nature. And likewise, even the males left the natural use of the female, became violently inflamed in their lust toward one another, males with males, working what is obscene and receiving in themselves the full recompense which was due for their error. Now, we've talked about this. I did a whole video on whether Christians can be LGBTQ. And basically, of course, it's the same principle, right? Are you practicing these things, or are you just struggling with them? You're having a hard time with homo, and you make mistakes because of your desire, but you're fighting against it. You know it's not right. You know how what your rear end is for, and your penis, and for you lesbos, the vaginal area. But you have problems sometimes. The sin, your upbringing, culture, and you make a mistake. Right? Well, that's not the unforgivable sin. Homo is not the unforgivable sin. It's not good. No, very bad. But pretty much every other sin is too. Although, there's some bodily damage here in addition to the mental and spiritual damage that happens with this type of sin. So, nevertheless, it's not the unforgivable sin. You're just succumbing to the sinful nature that you've inherited in a way that you're going to have to answer for, but that if you fight against, right, you're not giving into it. You feel bad about it. You're trying to stop. You're not promoting homo as like good, right? We're not taking our sins. Peter didn't take the fact that he lied 3 times and says, hey, remember that time I lied about the Messiah and I got away? I was really worried they were going to arrest me right there. I was able to lie my way right out of it. No problem. No, right? He's probably felt like, could you imagine how he felt when Jesus, at some point, Peter probably was about to collapse. And of course, Jesus gave him strength because he knew. Remember, Peter was even the one who said, look, Lord, I'm a sinful man. You really shouldn't be dealing with me. And so, but that's just it, right? He admitted it. Just like that one person, the 2 people in Jesus' illustration where the one was standing there saying, I'm so happy I'm not like these other people. I'm so happy I don't do these bad things. And then the other one's over there, he can barely lift up his eyes, and he's just like, oh, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me for this. Well, which one do you think was Peter? Which one are you? Which one would the people who have died as part of these groups be? Verse 28, and just as they did not approve of holding God in accurate knowledge, God gave them up to a disapproved mental state, to do the things not fitting, filled as they were with all unrighteousness, wickedness, covetousness, badness, being full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malicious disposition, being whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, insolent, haughty, self-assuming, inventors of injurious things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, false to agreements, having no natural affection, merciless. Although these know full well the righteous decree of God, that those practicing such things are deserving of death, they not only keep doing them, but also consent with those practicing them. That's what I was just talking about right there. Look, this part right here. They not only keep doing them, but they consent with those, right? They're like into it. They approve of it. They're not struggling against it. They're not making a mistake due to weakness or succumbing to their desire even occasionally. They keep on doing them and consent with those practicing them. That's the vile right here. This is the vile things of John 5. This keep on doing them, right? Because even the people who do the good things, right? Like Peter, someone like him, he lied, but he didn't keep on lying or consent with those practicing the lie. So the good things people and the vile things people, probably all of them have done some of the same sins, but not all of them continued doing them and consented with others by approving them. Yeah, this is good. Let's go. Anal, right? Or whatever. So there's no like, oh no, I can't believe I made a mistake type thing. It's like, no, we're good. Let's go. Get your plugs ready. It's all true. What happened? Chapter 2, verse 1. Therefore, you are inexcusable, a man, whoever you are, if you judge. For in the thing in which you judge another, you condemn yourself, inasmuch as you that judge practice the same things. I just said that, right? The good things people and the vile things people are all basically doing the same things. But the good things people don't keep on doing them or consent with those doing them as if approving of the practice. And the good things people don't judge the vile things people. It doesn't mean we don't recognize the vile things those people do, but we know we've done some of the same things ourselves. And we don't know to what extent this applies to them. We might see them keep doing it, but really there's a point where only God can tell whether or not, we can get a good indication, but ultimately it's God who's going to decide that. It's Jesus who's going to decide that. So this judging here, right? Because look at that. If you judge another, you condemn yourself. Same thing as Matthew 7. So even if you don't practice vile things, you don't keep on doing them and approve of them, if you judge someone with finality who does, is why I said it's not, the LGBTQ question can't be answered by someone like me, because I can't judge that person. I can tell what's wrong in terms of whether you want to practice homo or not, but we all make the same mistakes at times in ways where it won't allow us to judge another person like that. We can recognize something that's wrong and avoid it so we don't fall in the same trap. But we can't determine the future salvation of anyone. Therefore, you are inexcusable, O man, whoever you are, if you judge. For in the thing in which you judge another, you condemn yourself. Okay, I read that. Now, and that's very important, right? And so, but we still, obviously, that doesn't mean we don't make decisions about doctrine. We can't determine if someone is lying to us. If someone's lying to me, you're a liar. Well, you can stop lying, right? Peter was lying. Well, Peter, you just lied. I know for a fact you know the Messiah. So, oh, you just lied again. You did it again. 3 times? Oh, Peter, mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, everything's established. You might be done. Mercy from God and Messiah. You got it. These things are very important for us to keep in mind, because I think probably the most difficult trap to avoid is that. Right here. And so while we don't sanction or approve things that are bad, even if we've done them, and while we can recognize what's wrong and openly reject it, that does not provide us a basis for making wholesale future condemnations of anyone. Watchtower leadership could change, have a change of heart and say, you know what? We just can't keep doing this anymore. We just can't keep exchanging the truth for the lie. We made some mistakes. We thought we could get through this. It's not going to work out. We're not going to be able to pull this back into line with the Bible. It really never was in line with the Bible. We're going to stop this. And we just want to work with everybody together, right? We're going to kind of create a new arrangement so that, you don't have to completely trust us like God and Jesus. They could do that. And if they did that, just like Peter, who lied about the Messiah multiple times, enough for a witness to be established, we would have to forgive them. Does that mean we would have to work with them and approve them? No, we'd probably want to be a little cautious right there, right? Just like if Catholics or Trinitarians or others say, you know what? Yeah, okay, I think the Trinity is false. Now I see that. Okay, well, it is pretty obvious, and so let's see you continue to do that. They have to show who they are. And we can continue to work with them while they do so if that's what they choose. Now, we know that the judgment of God is in accordance with truth against those who practice such things. But do you have this idea, oh man, that while you judge those who practice such things and yet you do them, that you will escape the judgment of God? So we can talk about Trinitarians and their false doctrine and their traditions that invalidate God's word. But what if we have false doctrine? What if our traditions are invalidating God's word? Right? If the Watchtower Society basically never stops writing about times and seasons, that's a direct violation, right, of the text. So if the Trinitarians are directly violating the text with the Trinity, one God the Father, and the Watchtower Society is directly violating the text by writing about times and seasons, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and getting excited about it. They're both addressed there. Writing about it all and getting excited about it are both said we don't need to, and we're not to do it. So it would seem, right? I mean, that kind of sounds like it could be both. It could be the Trinitarians, right? Judging the Watchtower people. Oh, you guys are in a cult. You guys are heretics. You're going to be condemned to hell. All while they're teaching the Trinity, right? And then we've got the Watchtower people telling the Trinitarians, as false God, you're not using God's name. You're worshiping a false God. And so you're a part of the Christendom apostasy, and you're going to be destroyed at Armageddon. Is that not what's happening? It kind of seems like that's what's happening. And if that's true, I mean, it almost seems like a satanic trap, huh? It's like each side has been manipulated into that disposition of judgment toward the other regarding the same or similar type of false teaching. Right? And so effectively, by misleading people into either a Trinitarian group or the Watchtower group and getting them to judge each other while doing the same things, you effectively eliminate both. I hope that's not true. I hope that there are people who can be approved and resurrected even though they may have died as part of these groups. And I'm sure it seems like, right, because not everyone in the past knew all the things we know now or got to see things develop in ways that made them more obvious to us versus to them, right? So my mother I know her very well, right? She was very studious and all, but there are certain things she didn't see or maybe care to see. She was not aware of them. Maybe, whether she should have been or not is not the issue. The fact is she wasn't. So if she's not aware, for example, of the problems with 1914, and she's promoting 1914 with the Watchtower, would that count against her? Is that going to be enough for God to say, you know what? You exchanged the truth for the lie? Well, she didn't know about it. She didn't really understand the problems with it. She believed it, and she shouldn't have, but she didn't know enough about why she shouldn't have to not. Right? So there's so many scenarios and considerations that are beyond our ability to fully consider and apply. We have to be so careful because when I read this text, right, it's almost like you Trinitarians and Watchtower people are each disqualifying yourselves by attacking each other with condemnatory judgment over a teaching that is not explicitly taught in the Bible and contradicted by what's explicitly taught. But you're both doing that. It's just a different subject. Romans 2:4. We're going to go to Romans 2:11. Or do you despise the riches of his kindness and forbearance and long-suffering, because you do not know that the kindly quality of God is trying to lead you to repentance. But according to your hardness and unrepentant heart, you are storing up wrath for yourself on the day of wrath and of the revealing of God's righteous judgment. And he will render to each one according to his works. Everlasting life to those who are seeking glory and honor and incorruptibleness by the endurance and work that is good, right? Good things. Those who practice good things, like Jesus says. However, for those who are contentious and who disobey the truth. That's not a reference to your organization, Watchtower, by the way. Those and who disobey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and anger. Right? So that's kind of similar to what we read earlier in terms of the whole exchanging the truth for the lie, disobeying the truth, obeying unrighteousness. Kind of very similar to that. Verse 9, tribulation and distress upon the soul of every man who works what is injurious, of the Jew first and also of the Greek. Verse 10, but glory and honor and peace for everyone who works what is good, for the Jew first and also for the Greek, for there is no partiality with God, right? That doesn't mean these people aren't sinning, right? These people right here who get glory and honor and peace, working what is good, right? The ones who practice good things, we're still sinners, right? In fact, he says that right here. He's saying, just don't judge people because you do those same things. You are doing good things too, and you're not promoting, this wicked stuff and claim, and like justifying it. You're just making mistakes because you're sinful. Don't judge people though, because you do them. And yet, even though we do some of these things that the people who are judged unworthy by God do, we're not practicing them. We're not promoting them. We're making mistakes and we feel bad and we're trying to do better. That's a huge difference from those who promote what they're doing wrong and embrace it. And so we can still sin and do the very things occasionally that the people who are condemned do, while we do work that is good, right? Just like Joseph. So the question then is getting a little clearer, isn't it? It's very obvious that we do them. We do the things that others who are not approved do. We just don't do them to the same extent nor embrace them in ways that basically say that this is a good thing to do. No, we're like the opposite. We feel bad. We don't want to do it, but we make mistakes. We have desires. We have weaknesses. And sometimes we're just stupid. So that can happen. People in the past who are part of these different groups didn't fully understand maybe some of the problems with these groups. Or even if they did, right? Even if they did understand and do them wrongly, they didn't do them to the extent that other people did in ways that would suggest that doing something wrong is approved by that person. It's what they want to do. Remember what Paul says? Sometimes what I want to do, what I don't want to do is what I do, right? He doesn't want to do it, but he did it. That's different from people who want to do it and who do it. And then who approvingly join with others in doing it and are like, let's go. This is going to be bad. Revelation 11. Almost done here. Thanks for joining me. I wanted to do this. A little follow-up to yesterday's show so everyone had a little more balanced perspective and didn't get all freaked out, right? Just because Watchtower's teachings are being further revealed as what they are, false. They never should have even gotten into this stuff. It's just like their own self-inflicted wound by ignoring what the text says. still, though, right, we have to look at this and not be so judgmental against people who support the Watchtower or even the Watchtower itself that we condemn ourselves. Right? That, to me, seems like a satanic trap, right? It's just too easy to do, and it's almost like a setup. It's like his lies and misleading the earth has wound people up in so many layers of belief and thought that it's just so easy to judge in a way that we're not supposed to, and that ends up destroying us. It's like a 2-for-1. We don't want to let him get that. Revelation 20. Right? So we can still reject the Watchtower's teachings, reject Catholics' teachings, reject the Trinity, all this stuff, reject the Mormon prophet. That doesn't mean we have to judge them in a way that's going to put us at risk. We got to watch that. Refute the false doctrine, but let's not say that you're all condemned to death at Armageddon or you're all condemned to hell. Watchtower people, you guys do that a lot. Everyone's going to die at Armageddon who's not in the Watchtower. You're very judgmental. You guys are really judgmental. And I don't understand why you don't see the danger in that. I know it's like an insecurity thing, right? Because any type of toleration, it just feels better to condemn something you believe is false versus accept it at all. But we need to be more, it's broader than that, right? Like we're seeing is stuff we do too. We're not supposed to judge to the extent that then it condemns us. We've got to walk a little bit of a fine line here. We have to reject what's true, openly reprove liars and false teachers before all, so that others may have fear, severely, the Bible says, where necessary. But at the same time, we got to be careful we don't become the final judge. We can reject what's wrong, leave it at that, and if people keep doing what's wrong, we can keep rejecting it, and then we defer to God and Jesus when it comes to what's going to happen to them. We don't go around telling people they're going to be destroyed at Armageddon. We can tell them that they're teaching what's false, that they're practicing what's wicked, but we can't tell them they're condemned to death or they're going to burn in hell, right? Christendom does that all the time. Sam Shamoon is one of the most judgmental people out there. And the Trinitarian apologetic nuts basically used him for decades to do that very thing, to blaspheme people, to condemn people in a very hateful and vile manner. Now they see the problem with that, but that was never a good idea. That was never what you were supposed to do. It doesn't matter if you think the Watchtower is heretics or Mormons are heretics. You guys are heretics. You do the same thing. You're following these false teachings and lies and telling people it's the truth. Give me a break. Revelation chapter 20, 11 through 13. And I saw a great white throne, and the one seated on it. From before him the earth and the heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing before the throne. And scrolls were open, and another scroll was opened. It's the scroll of life. And the dead were judged out of those things written in the scrolls according to their deeds. And the sea gave up those dead in it, and death and Hades gave up those dead in them. And they were judged individually according to their deeds. Those who practice good things, resurrection of life. Those who practice vile things, you embraced your sin, you promoted your sin, you liked that sin, that was good to you, you didn't feel bad about it at all, judgment. So if you want to know the answer to the question whether or not people who can belong to organizations or groups that teach false doctrine and still be approved, it depends on the individual, doesn't it? It depends on whether or not they suppress the truth in an unrighteous manner, doesn't it? It depends on whether they exchange the truth for a lie, doesn't it? It depends on whether or not they knew it was a lie. Right? Did the widow with 2 small coins, whom Jesus pointed to as an example at the temple, mean that she knew everything that was going on at that temple in terms of the buying and selling and the merchandising? Yeah, she did know. What's she going to do? Is she going to run out there and start overturning the tables of the scribes and Pharisees? Not an old poor widow. That's what you need to remember. Because everyone's going to be judged individually according to our deeds. No matter whether we did those deeds in association with other people who taught false doctrine or did false things, it's going to be about what you chose to do and what you didn't choose to do. And yeah, I would recommend you put yourself with people who are teaching the truth and not promoting lies and false doctrine. But we're not all going to be able to get out of that, are we? Not everybody in the past was able to get out of that, were they? Those who can should. Those who can't, you'll be judged individually according to your deeds. Last text, Daniel 12. Let's do it. Daniel 12. Right, starts out talking about Michael standing up on behalf of the sons of you people, time of distress, since nothing like it before. Everyone will escape who's found written down in the book. Many will be asleep in the ground. They'll wake up to indefinitely lasting life. Some to indefinitely lasting abhorrence, right? Resurrection of life. Those who did good things. Resurrection of judgment. Those who did bad things. I talk about all these texts extendedly in my first death, second death, first resurrection, second resurrection video. So you can see that video for more details on these texts. It talks about the ones having insight, shining brightly. And then he says, as for you, Daniel, make secret the words and seal up the book until the time of the end. Many will rove about, and the true knowledge will become abundant. And I saw, I, Daniel, and look, there were 2 others standing. Okay, we'll skip back to that. Right there, he sees the 2 standing on the bank, right? That is, in my opinion, it's Michael and Gabriel, the 2 that are mentioned in Daniel. Man clothed with linen, standing above the waters, proceeds to raise his right hand left to heaven and swear by the one who is alive for time indefinite. And he talks about the finishing of the power of the holy people. And then Daniel says, I heard, but I couldn't understand. And so I said, oh Lord, what will be the final part of these things? And he went on to say, go, Daniel, because the words are made secret and sealed up until the time of the end. Many will cleanse themselves and whiten themselves and be refined. And the wicked ones will certainly act wickedly, and no wicked ones at all will understand. But the ones having insight will understand. And from the time that the constant feature, right, so he's talking a little bit more about certain prophecies. But at the last part of the last verse of Daniel, he says, and as for you yourself, this is the angel talking to Daniel, go toward the end, and you will rest, but you will stand up for your lot at the end of the days. That's what we just read right here. I saw the dead, the great and the small, standing. And scrolls were opened, and they were judged out of those things written in the scrolls according to their deeds, their lot at the end of the days. Every single individual, whether it's Daniel, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, people we never knew who were part of these different religious groups, whether it's Watchtower, Catholic, different Protestant groups, Mormons, you name it. Everyone is going to stand up for their lot, except for those, right? This is the second resurrection. The first resurrection, it says that right here, right? These are the thrones, the people who are raised to life to sit on the thrones and rule with Jesus for 1,000 years. I talk about all this in that video I mentioned. First resurrection, second resurrection, first death, second death. Rest of the dead did not come to life till 1,000 years were ended. right? And then as soon as 1,000 years, Satan has ended, misleads people, they're destroyed, and then all the dead are raised up. We're judged individually according to our deeds and stand up for our lot at the end of the days. And so we're going to have to wait until that time to determine whether or not anybody who was a part of these groups or who promoted a lot of these teachings that turned out to be false, nevertheless, did good things to the extent that God recognized, in spite of our sinful state, is enough for him to gift us life, because we did enough to show him that even though we have this problem, this deficiency of sin, we still cared enough about the truth and what was right to do the best we could and not give in to it, not justify doing wrong. We didn't judge other people and condemn them for practicing the things that, while we don't do regularly, we've done. It's not our place to judge anyone, whether you're in the Watchtower, whether you're a Trinitarian, or anybody else. That action, that determination is and will always remain God's, or anyone to whom he chooses to give it.